I would like to take this time to thank the Kala founding partners, Cinnamon Life City of Dreams, Hutton National Bank, Vijay Newspapers, the Rukmini Tisaniagam Trust, and the Fernando Family Foundation. I am very grateful to everyone who is part of the Kala team, so thank you so much for helping us organize this. I also want to give a very big thank you, and I want to say how grateful I am to the Faisal and Shabana Foundation and Kisa Goy for supporting this entire talk series. My name is Meneesha. I am the founder and executive director of Art South Asia Project. For those of you who don't know, Art South Asia Project, that we like to call ASAP for short, is a platform that helps connect all 5 countries in South Asia with each other, which includes Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh. Yes. Excellent. And oh my God, the UK diaspora where we're based as well. Yeah, this is great. This talk is called Shared Visions, How Institutions and Artists Work Together. We are very pleased to have our panelists here, which include Iaroslav Volovod and Meneesha Kellay. Why no? Oh no. Okay, so Meneesha is the senior curator of contemporary at the Victoria and Albert Museum. She has done some wonderful projects there, alongside having worked at the Venice Biennale as well, and curated a wonderful exhibition there too. For those of you who don't know, the V&A is actually a design museum, so she focuses a lot on architecture, design, and textile and craft. Iaroslav, who is coming from the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi, has also been curating for many, many years and has worked at the Garage Museum in Russia and Mexico as well. Fun fact about Iaroslav, he is fluent in Hindi, which is something he learned during his tutorial studies during his MA. Yes. So now I am very happy to start this conversation and have Iaroslav and Meneesha discuss how curators at institutions work with artists and what it's like to work with an artist in such a big institution in regards to the different commissions and collecting you do. I'm going to hand it over to Iaroslav.
Hi, thank you, Nora, for introduction. Good evening, everyone, and really thank you to Kala and ASAP for this generous invitation to be here and to learn from the very exciting context that is Sri Lanka. I'm going to be sharing a couple of examples from my practice today, but just to reiterate what Nora already said, I'm indeed trained originally in South Asian studies and had a very robust 4 years of training in Sanskrit and Hindi in something that is called Indo-Aryan philology. And later on, I did a master's in curatorial studies where I concentrated on South Asian diaspora artists in the UK. And some of the projects later on that I worked on were the continuation of this research. And currently I'm a curator at Guggenheim Abu Dhabi, Department of Culture and Tourism. It's a plant museum that is being built right now in the beautiful capital of the UAE. But the projects I'm going to be sharing about come from different positions I inhabited during my professional life. One of them is that of a former curator of Garage Museum of Contemporary Art, which is a private museum, unlike Guggenheim Abu Dhabi, which is a project owned by the state of the Emirate of Abu Dhabi and is an agreement between a private foundation in New York, so it's a different setup. And also as an independent curator working as a guest curator invited by institutions. So it's different positions, there's different specifications attached to it, so it's going to be a plethora of different projects. So I'm going to be taking you through some of them, and I made a selection of projects that are related to South Asia in one way or another. And of course, the easiest way for a curator to work with an artist is just to invite them and include an existing piece, which sometimes become a very difficult feat to achieve and accomplish. Is still from an exhibition I co-curated in 2018 called The Fabric of Felicity, that looked into the various aspects of what clothing could be outside of the context of fashion. Clothing as, a mnemonic device, as a magical object, as an offline avatar. And of course, speaking about, garment industry and clothing, we couldn't avoid, context of South Asia. And one of the first pieces in that exhibition was this wonderful work that many of you might have seen in Bangladesh, produced by Kamruzaman Shaheen, wonderful artist, that basically dedicated this work to one of the biggest humanitarian catastrophes in South Asia, which is the displacement of Rohingya people and also the ecological, migrants that, are displaced in Bangladesh. So this is a monument that is made of different pieces of clothing that is swapped and taken from the dispossessed. So basically, it becomes a monument to a humanitarian ecological catastrophe akin to works by such artists as Christian Baltansky. This is one example of institution engaging with an artist. It's an invitation to an existing concept of an exhibition that predates a conversation, but then of course it could be new work. In this case, we just brought the artist and the work to Russia, which was not an easy thing to do with the visas and reinforced national borders. Another more exciting, this is not a still shot from an exhibition. I will skip through real quick here. Another mode of work would be working, with an artist more deeply and more meaningfully, and sometimes even fulfilling their dreams and their desires of the past. In 2019, again at the Garage Museum of Contemporary Art, I co-curated a retrospective of Rashid Arain. I was working on a Russian leg of this exhibition that traveled in Europe, in Geneva, and also in Gateshead in the UK, and at Van Abbe in the Netherlands. So we received this beautiful exhibition in Russia, and this is some of the installation shots. But when we had the artist coming into our context, we really asked him, what are your dreams and expectations from that exhibition? He said, hey, I've been really always inspired by the Soviet avant-garde, and I once conceived this project in 1968 that is actually an homage to the Soviet-Russian artist Vladimir Tatlin. And it's just a design, it's just a sketch that was never ever brought into existence. This is some of the installation shots, and just to say, Garage Museum of Contemporary Art is housed in a 1968 Soviet modernist building, which itself is a very resonant context for Rashid. And here you can see how his structures come into formal dialogue with the original tile of the Soviet modernist building, which Rashid really liked a lot. But I'm talking about this project. It was a sketch, it was an idea conceived in 1968, and then 50 years after, we're bringing Rashid to Russia, to Moscow, where he actually get to see, the Tatlin's work, in situ, and we offered him this opportunity to actually create this monumental piece. And I guess for me, working in this modality or fulfilling artist's dream is my favorite modality, I would say. So this is something I find extremely beautiful that institutions can do and how they can empower artists and rewrite art histories. Just a little bit of more of this exhibition. This doesn't work anymore. Okay, so here you can see the Tatlin Tower in the atrium of Garage Museum, and in the back is the Soviet mosaic from 1968. It's a monumental, beautiful piece. Another thing we did with Rashid was, when we looked into his archive, is the disco sailing, is a performance he conceived in 1970s, but again never get to realize for various reasons. Not in the UK, not in Pakistan. So we...
Oh, recently.
Yes, so we are the proud owner of the world premiere of this piece in 2019 that took place in the Pioneers Pond in the Gorky Park. This is some of the sketches. So this is the documentation we had in Russia in the Gorky Park in 2019. Beautiful piece, attracted a lot of attention. And of course the dialogue between this piece and Soviet avant-garde, artistic practices, and even something that we call occupational gymnastics that happens at a factory. There's a lot of dialogue between this and even the uniform that was designed. So this is some of the examples, and we also had the honor to publish his essays in Russian, which was actually a great success, and many people found the text resonant. So this is one of the few modalities we can work with an artist, and of course there are many more, but maybe Meneesha can share a couple of examples from her practice.
introduction and for the invitation from Carla and ASAP. It's really wonderful to be here. And so my role in the museum really is to reveal and represent people who aren't necessarily, and support people who aren't visible, I guess, in the museum's permanent collection that you see in the walls of the many gallery spaces. We have 7 miles of gallery at the V&A, and I do interventions with artists, architects, designers to deliver installations in the museum, both for festivals such as this, and some for a slightly longer sort of 3-month period. So I'm going to take you through a few examples. And so because the kind of festival format is temporary, we're able to kind of have interventions in the museum that are kind of unexpected. And as I mentioned, our collection is from all over the world. We have a vast South Asian collection, as you may know. But the vast majority of the collection is not, well, let's just say the people that I commission are from the global majority and also from the global diaspora. So I'll begin with this work by Big Chief Damon Meneesha of the Young Seminole Hunters. His work had never been shown outside of the US. He's based in New Orleans. And he creates these incredible Mardi Gras suits that are actually used in Mardi Gras for performances, but they are kind of incredible artworks in of themselves. And they're here in the Tapestries Gallery in conversation with tapestries from the 1500s. These are the Devonshire tapestries that are depicting scenes of kind of the excess of the time. And then just see if I have another, more detailed image here. The works by Damonda are depicting scenes of the black struggle in the US. And they also kind of talk about how, forced migration and slavery across the Atlantic. So having that juxtaposition of Damon's work in this Tapestries Gallery was extremely powerful. And we also displayed a documentary by him in the gallery. And so this actually was a project that I brought into the museum 3 months after I joined. So it was a very, very fast turnaround. But because they are temporary projects, we can be quite agile. I'm currently working on an exhibition project that's 3 years in the making, and that's focused on South Asia. So I work at these kind of different paces, but soon I'll just be focused on the South Asia project, which maybe we can talk about in more detail as we go through. This is another kind of temporary installation. It's a pavilion in the museum called Between Forest and Skies by Nebula Works. Both Madhav and Brando they met at Heatherwick Studio. And another thing that I like to do is work with young emerging architects or designers that haven't necessarily had a platform in other museums or institutions. So they designed this ultra-low carbon aluminium pavilion, which meant that you could actually walk in the water of the V&A's elliptical pond, which were never able to do without getting your feet wet before. So this was a really kind of light touch work, which actually appears later on in my presentation, which I'll take you through shortly. These are some images of it. It appears to kind of float on water. I do a yearly emerging designer commission for the London Design Festival, and this is a kind of it's a physical, digital, and then back to physical piece that I commissioned Excessive Aesthetics, an all-female interdisciplinary or design collective. They're made up of architects, digital designers, artists, and they took inspiration from David, who's in the cast court, so it's a replica of David. And this is called Not David. It's a selfie of themselves, which they then kind of modified and translated through various software. And then more recently, I worked with Adam Sabo, who also was part of the Emerging Designer Commission, and he created this series of furniture objects from a single Alfa Romeo, a single car. He traced its 25-year service history, found all the previous owners, and then created objects that spoke to their stories. So the first owner, Jean, who you can see in the film in the background, the car became a lifeline for her when her husband passed away, and so Andy made a nightlight from the engine of the heart of the car, the engine. He created this nightlight, which, you know, these poetic, really beautiful stories. And then just a few months ago, we commissioned 3 designers, Angela Ford, Arjun Singh Asa, and Liang Chen, who, you know, Angela's got Caribbean heritage, Arjun's Sikh, but he grew up in Kenya, and Liang's from Taiwan. She was talking about the border condition in Taiwan and how contested that is. Angela was talking about her roots being, she actually did a DNA test and found that, you know, even though she's from Jamaica, she's got roots in West Africa. And Arjun was looking at Sikh heritage to create a furniture piece. So we really want people to kind of look into themselves, but also our collection, and see what connects. And then this is a project that we did with the Gifu prefecture in Japan, and washi paper is actually from there. And we worked with some London-based architects, Takeshi Hayatsu, to create this seating installation that is actually from the original idea was from the Hanamakoshi festival, which takes place in Gifu each year, which is celebrating this kind of history of paper making. And so we replicated how the festival structures, the shrines, are made in Gifu by working with children in workshops over the summer to actually create the installation. This is a project by Nep Sidhu, who is a Canadian, Toronto-based artist, and he worked with a London-based charity called Without Shape, Without Form, who look at the kind of Sikh principles, bring those together through art practices. And so we brought a number of Nep's paintings and tapestries into the gallery. And there's also a sound piece by Carlos Nino. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, so maybe we should go on to the next question. And
Great, because I love the difference between the different commissions that both institutions we've talked about. So with Iaroslav, you know, Rashid is older, but he has also just gotten into the, I don't know how to explain it. He kind of, but not really. Because the artist that Iaroslav had worked with, he was a Black Panther and he was quite prolific. He put together magazines and he worked and talked quite a lot about being included into the Western art world when he was living in London. He was also a curator as well. And I think a lot of people forgot about him, or I'm not really sure how to put it in context. So it was amazing to see you bringing Rashid back to life kind of at the Garage Museum, and then having that show travel to so many different places. But then Meneesha, you've clearly researched so many different artists and brought them into a museum where you see historical artifacts and have them commissioned with, you know, those artifacts and seeing how they work in conversation with each other. So it's amazing the different research and processes that go behind it. And it was great to see what you had done with the the design festival in London as well. And there's so many different aspects to how artists are commissioned and researched and all that. So that means obviously you are researching the artists that you are working with, and you're bringing them together in these institutions or at large events as well. So when you are doing the research and you're going to artist studios, is there a particular motive you have in mind? Like, what are you thinking while you're going through that process?
Yeah, I actually think there's a big burden on the artists nowadays, and there's a lot of expectations, especially on part of institutions. And of course, you know, many institutions are looking for formal precision, the strength of intellectual, you know, proposition, the innovative thinking, all of these things. There was a lot of pressure. And just going back to some of the projects that Meneesha said, some of these things need a lot of time to gestate, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And one of this project that I wanted to share was actually that came about from a friendship. I came across this wonderful artist in a Kochi biennial, Afra Shafiq. She's based in Goa, and we saw her work, and we ended up working for 3.5 years together. She just premiered with a beautiful piece called Sultana's Reality, which is a video game inspired by an early 20th century sci-fi feminist short story about a young woman waking up in a ladyland, in a world run by women, and it's a better world, of course. There's no wars, there's ecological transport, of course. And it's written by Rokeya Sahabat Hussain, a pioneer of South Asian education in Bangladesh. So I was drawn to the work, the form of a video game, its appeal to the audience, the kids, the aesthetics of the work. And then I came to her and said, hey, do you want to work together on something? And she said, you're from Russia? But yeah. And she's like, in the 70s and 80s, there's been a lot of Russian children books, Soviet children books, translated into new Indian languages, into Hindi, Urdu, and Tamil, and they're so lavishly illustrated. And there's this whole generation of people who grew up in South Asia having this nostalgia about the country that was never theirs, And I said, why don't we do a research about it? And it turned out that, we worked intensely for 3 years together. She reached out to these communities of collectors in Bangladesh, in India, and Pakistan who collect Soviet children's books, with the short stories from, Armenia, Ukraine, Lithuania, Belarus, lavishly illustrated, of course, printed and distributed as part of the kind of communist propaganda during the Cold War. There were publishing houses set up across South Asia. So she looks into the depth of the material, and the Garage Museum of Contemporary Art offered her fantastic grant research opportunity, and in the end she created another video game that is called Nobody Knows for Certain. And she created these peculiar characters that you can, follow in their search of discovering these things. One of them is a cat without a tail, and another is a Matryoshka doll that is empty. And you go with these characters in the wonderful land, and you collect fully digitized and readable books. But then as you progress, you realize that storytelling sometimes can be dark, and a side of subversion, and a side of control. And then she unraveled all of these beautiful narratives. And we presented this work in Dark Art Summit at the last edition, and now I know for sure that this work is successfully collected by some major institutions in Asia and in the West. So that would be, an example of what I as a curator look at, and in many ways it's also a friendship, or it's like a marriage, because you enter in a very long-lasting relationship that then results in something beautiful like this. So I don't know, do I answer your question here?
Absolutely. And Meneesha, you obviously have done so much at the V&A, but I would love to hear more about your work at the Venice Biennial and how that came around, because I think quite a lot of people in the audience would like to know that, including myself.
So, outside of my work at the V&A, I co-curated the British Pavilion at the Venice Architecture, Venice Architecture Biennale for the British Pavilion, and we were actually 4 friends. We were just in a WhatsApp group. People kept on asking us, what's your collective called? We're not a collective. And these are the artists, this is us with the artists that we worked with. The exhibition was called Dancing Before the Moon, and that's based on a James Baldwin quote, which is, there is a reason after all that some wish to colonize the moon and others dance before it as an ancient friend. And we took that as a provocation to really look at how diasporic communities in the UK there is this kind of sense of care for one another, and how through rituals and through how we enact our heritage in public space, we're actually shaping and creating public space in a new way that isn't necessarily kind of formal architecture. So we had a film that depicted this process. So it took you through both archive footage and new footage that we created, looking at this kind of placemaking, and it was scenes of protest that were taken from Handsworth songs by John Confer, and at this point we didn't know that John Confer was going to be the artist for the next Venice Biennale, so that was a really special moment for us. And that was when, in the 1980s, the Black and Asian community came together to protest against and really show solidarity against police brutality. So that was juxtaposed with scenes of Carnival, Notting Hill Carnival, which began as a protest, but actually is a moment of celebration through dance for people across the world, those from the global south. And then we also had footage of like a No Heathen in Southall, which is a Sikh celebration that happens twice a year. Naga meaning neighbourhood, and Heathen meaning singing, so literally neighbourhood singing, and anyone can come out and cook and feed the general public. So you see a couple of days before these kind of temporary structures popping up all across Southall. And actually, if you're a mile away in kind of Ealing or elsewhere in West London, you wouldn't know what's happening. So it's very specific to that community. And we were questioning why. That's so specific. So this is one of the installations outside the British Pavilion. We worked with 5 different artists, and we gave them a brief that kind of talked about this, asked them the question, if how to kind of make and shape space through your history, what's come before you, what's important to you, your DNA. And so Yusuf Agbola, he created this incredible fabric temple. We call it the Flynet Temple because it looks like Nike pants. And Madhav Kadal, who is actually one half of Nebbia Works, and this aluminium is the pavilion that you saw at the V&A that I showed earlier. So that aluminium was actually melted down and created into this new piece called Bardo, which is a Buddhist term for that moment between life and death, the kind of recreation and destruction and rebirth of something new. Sandra Pawson here with Sabdo Zul Diagua. She was looking at her, she's an artist that lives and works in London, but is from Rwanda, and she was looking at her grandmother being a washerwoman, and how Sandra saw so much pride in the work that she did. She created this installation from soap. And Matt Collins with this piece called Run Out, which is this kind of amorphous shape that he kind of saw when he was growing up, and it's related to dominoes. So Jamaican dominoes is a really specific type of dominoes that's played in pubs in Nottingham that are Jamaican run, and he kind of created this as an ode to that. Shawanda Corbett, Healing is Coming. She is a London-based artist that's actually from the Deep South in Louisiana in America, and she's created these pieces that relate to her upbringing through food and culture. So yeah, that's a quick running through of Venice, but we really felt, we had a great response to the exhibition, but people did ask us, this is an architecture. It's like we can think about architecture through many different models and mediums, and part of my practice is kind of looking at the intersections of art, design, architecture, and performance, because there is, and I feel like actually in across South Asia there's so much more acceptance of that being the case, because when we talk about design, there's no one way of describing what design is. It can be through the medium of fashion, textiles, furniture, all the way up to kind of urban design and architecture. So I try to encourage artists when I'm working with them to kind of not preempt what an institution wants, what they think an institution might want from them, and really kind of nurture their identity, and not trying to kind of look at the V&A as somewhere in South Kensington as a powerful institution that might kind of seem intimidating. My curatorial practice is always one of leading with care and empathy to try and make the institution more meaningful for them to work with us. It's really a two-way process. I try and break down those hierarchies and not come with this label of the V&A, but as an institution that wants to work with them and kind of make this kind of institution that was born of the colonial era more relevant to them as an artist working today.
No, that's amazing, and it's really important to emphasize that care and not trying to fit into the institution where you think you need to be, or whatever that meaning is. But that actually brings me to a question that is not a question. But when you are working with artists, depending on kind of where they are in their career, you have talked about commissioning and putting together exhibitions. What is the timeline for that? How long does it take? Like, how much time do you spend with the artist from the day you ask them to commission or be part of an exhibition to the day the exhibition opens? How long does that take?
It varies massively. Like Damon's work that I showed you at the very beginning, those pieces can take up to a year to make. And he obviously has this incredible collection, and that wasn't a commission, but rather we were loaning the works to come into the museum, so that was 3 months. And because I'm kind of doing interventions in existing gallery spaces, that the V&A is a museum, it's free and open to the public, anyone can kind of walk in and see those. But when you're talking about a temporary exhibition context of say at the moment there's a great Mughals exhibition, and that is 2 or 3 years, maybe more, in the works, and the process of building the narrative and the storytelling that goes into an exhibition like that takes that long. Also loans, often institutions won't loan you something unless you ask at least a year in advance. So it varies massively. But I think, when you're commissioning new work, it's fair to give at least, 6 to 9 months. 9 months, I think, is a minimum.
Okay, and then, like with Dhaka Art Summit, like the work you had just shown, like, how long did it take from meeting the artist all the way to getting that work there?
I think it took good 3 years because it was deeply research-driven practice, and it also required a lot of, permissions, approvals from, stakeholders, people who are holding on to these artifacts. She also went into these archives in Russia and find correspondence between, children in the Soviet Union and Bangladesh, and to just digitize all of this, to get all the permissions, it took so long. But of course, sometimes it could be done way faster. This is an example from a show I curated independently in Berlin, whose name is actually very much inspired by Aga Shahizali poem, whose very epigraph is also a reference to a Russian poet, but I'm not going to get into that right now. I would just say that we had this fantastic artist there, who's a Polish artist, though Poles wouldn't feel represented because she's a Roma artist. Her name is Małgorzata Mirkatas, and being a Roma artist was also bringing us to thinking about longue durée histories of migration and how this is also, a kind of shard of large South Asian Indic worlds, and she, in her practice, looks, of course, into that. And she works with photographic archives that documents and talks to Roma communities in Eastern Europe, in the Balkans, and elsewhere, and translates them into these beautiful textile pieces. So, in case with Małgorzata, in this case, it took us it took her only 2 months to produce these 2 monumental pieces. But it really depends on the practice. And she has a beautiful studio in Poland. She repurposed this, swathes of fabric that are discarded. She has 2 lovely ladies helping her. So she had a more kind of established practice and people who helped her. So it just took a couple of months here in this particular case.
Amazing. So, right, 2 months to 3 years, 6 to 9 months. So there are a lot of different variations on this. This leads me to another question, which is, so you've talked a lot and heavily about commissioning, and you've used the word temporary exhibitions as well, which I think is really great. When you have a temporary exhibition in an institution like the Victoria and Albert Museum, or whichever institution like the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi, does that work then go into the permanent collection, or does it just, because I think that's a question that a lot of people have asked me, and I have no idea how it works.
I wish. Yeah. No, unfortunately, I'm not a collections curator. I've got quite a unique role at the V&A in commissioning. Most curators at the V&A, there's about 100, have a very specific specialism, whether it's movable miniatures or a special type of kind of 19th century metalwork or architecture. So yes, when you're curating an exhibition, it's both an opportunity to share more of the V&A's collection, but also bring in work from around the world. I'm working on something which will focus on contemporary South Asian design, so that's from across the region, and actually that's something that is really poorly represented in our collection. So it will be majority new works, including some new commissions, and so that there's opportunities to both show works in the collection, but also bring multiple voices from across certain regions that are specific to the exhibition that you're working on, that haven't been shown in the UK before. I think a lot of the people in that show will be completely new to UK audiences.
Amazing. I am very excited to see this show. Iaroslav, can you touch on that a little bit too?
Yeah, of course I would be happy to, but to start with, I would say that I worked in 2 different types of institutions, and Garage was never a collecting institution per se.
Okay.
It has only recently started doing that. So let's say the museum will invest into producing a work and it would be never collected by an institution. On the contrary, right now I'm represented a nascent planned museum that hopefully is going to open very soon, that is very much a collecting institution, and this collection has been in formation since 2009, and it welcomed around 1,000 artworks and more hopefully to follow. And of course, as a non-existing museum, we didn't yet produce works to enter into our collection, but hopefully we will be able to produce a space for this. And maybe I can use this opportunity to talk a little bit more about this beautiful museum coming up on Saadiyat Island in Abu Dhabi.
Please. You must.
So, as I said, it's a collecting institution, and the collection has a truly global ambition, while indeed in the very heart of it is several geographical foci. One is, of course, West Asia, and 2 other pillars are South Asia and North Africa. And of course, Sri Lanka being a very important part of South Asian focus. So this is the geographical domain that we are, as curators, are looking at. Another one would be the chronological frame. So we collect modern and contemporary art from 1960 onwards. So it's only this period, but there's a lot to look into, and really, revisiting shattering the canon and dismantling the canon, and writing art history 101 as not as a footnote in somebody else's art history, but as a history in its own right. Collecting all medias across the board, moving image, sound, hopefully performance soon, object and painting. So very vast collection. And yeah, we are looking artists across the board, but as I said, the ambition and scope is truly global and planetary.
I mean, that's amazing. You've got a new institution opening up, and you've got a wonderful exhibition coming up, and so very happy to hear about all of this. I may have known before, I don't know. But I guess this leads me to my next question, which, Meneesha, you touched on really beautifully when you said that you don't think an artist should fit into a mold of an institution that they think of. But what is advice that you would give to young artists that do want to work with the institutions that you work for?
What advice would I give them? Well, I would say, much like I mentioned before, like the goal for a young artist shouldn't be to create work for an institution, but it should be, pursuing something that is core to their identity, who they are, and how they'd like to share that, or just create beautiful things. And yeah, I'm just thinking about, well, maybe I could share some images about the rest of the contemporary program. So I also lead a team, and we run the monthly Friday Nights. And so they are the last Friday of the month at the V&A, where we draw in almost 6,000 people in the museum to take over. We invite kind of artists, designers, performers to do a series of activations across the museum. Usually it's about 12. There's DJs, there's often music performances or dance or theatre. There's installations in gallery spaces. And really it's an opportunity for young emerging artists across London to actually share their work at the museum. So they broadly follow the exhibition programme. This month we're working with Muslim Sisterhood. It's going to be on the first day of Ramadan, on the 28th of February, and that's to mark the Jamil Prize exhibition, Moving Images. And so we have, we're also doing, it's an alcohol-free event, so we have the power in our team to kind of say to the rest of the museum, which is over kind of 1,000 people, to say the community that we're working with, for them it's important that we don't serve alcohol at this event. And so we ensure that actually the museum fits for our audiences, to ensure that it's appropriate, and I think that's really important messaging, to create a space that is safe and welcoming. We'll also have specific prayer areas as well if people wish to take that up. So I think it's about kind of shifting these institutions to really cater for local audiences who are not the kind of 19th century V&A original audiences. So our role is really to kind of ensure that the museum moves with the times, and is really kind of responding to what our audiences want. And so that's why we do partnerships with people like Muslim Sisterhood. In March, I'm working with Curator, who are a platform. They're a digital platform for sharing South Asian culture, and that's in line with the Great Mughals. So the kind of Great Mughals, obviously 15th, 17th century, and so we've got a contemporary reading of what opulence is, what kind of art, design and performance means today to our communities. And I'll just kind of take you through a couple of quick images. So yeah, this is a performance, these are kind of DJs in the Grand Hall. We have more kind of performances and kind of testing on new ideas by designers in our public spaces. This was a specific Friday late marking the 75th anniversary of the independence of India and the foundation of Pakistan with Dialed In were our partner for that.
I was at this one.
Ah, well, you would have noticed that there were more brown people than white there, which was a first.
Yes, and that's how we want it.
And we had Akram Dance Company work with us, performances. We had talks with young designers like Rema Rahman from Bangladesh. We had curators who weren't part of the museum, or kind of figures who were interested in our collection give their kind of alternative tours of the collection. This is obviously Tipu's Tiger. And we've also kind of invited in artists. So Tyler Mitchell, he's a photographer based in the US. We showed some of his work, and he curated a Friday night in the museum. Nicholas Daly also did one last year. He's a fashion designer. So
Thank you, amazing. Iaroslav? Sorry, there's just too many wonderful slides.
course, there are all of those interests that institutions have and institutions pursue, but honestly, as a curator, I would hate, for an artist to change their practice and recalibrate it so that they fit into institutional mold. For me, it would be actually disastrous and detrimental, honestly. Of course, institutions have their own histories, identities, their DNAs. This is very important, but this is our job, and we will take care of that. I really think that artists should, do not think about it. Should not be scared of sending Curator into a panic attack with how experimental they are. Recently we didn't know how to collect video games. We didn't know how to collect performances. We didn't know how to collect pieces that deteriorate with time, and this is part of the work. If artists would start thinking like institutions, I think it would be the end of us and the end of the art world as we know it, and the end of art. I think we shouldn't be dictating those rules. Of course, in case Guggenheim Abu Dhabi, we could speak. It's a big museum, so we want something monumental. What is monumental? Can a piece of sound, fill up a huge space and be monumental? Or one little gesture or light, or light? All of these things. We don't need to answer this question, and don't need to impose these answers onto the artist. So I just think we just should be friends and really open-minded about what we bring into a collection, and I think institutions can accommodate change and should change from within metabolically, and curators should be sort of a conduit for these artistic practices to kind of, subvert the rigidness of institutions. I don't know if does it answer your question.
Absolutely, perfectly. And I think now is the right time to ask the audience if they have any questions.
Meneesha, you very briefly mentioned the South Asia project. I would love to know more about it if you have the time.
Yes, so it's the first major institutional show on contemporary South Asia design. So that's everything from fashion textiles to moving image and digital works to architecture and urbanism. And that's from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Nepal. Contemporary meaning kind of 2000 onwards. And there will be some kind of new commissions as part of that. We'll be working with some artists to create new work, but also showing existing work that there's also a sense, and I'm kind of very aware of this, that the V&A as an institution is based in London. There's an outpost in Scotland, but there's obviously an incredible amount of nurturing and care that has gone into supporting artists by institutions and festivals like Kala, Serendipity in Goa, India Art Fair, Dhaka, Kochi, the Lahore Biennial. So really I'll be working with, hope to be working with institutions and organisations across South Asia to really kind of build and kind of have a shared voice around this exhibition, because it's unbelievably, that it seems like South Asia's just kind of skipped over. There is this focus on the West, and then Japan, I guess, and with the V&A years ago to the China design now, but with this kind of middle South Asia just skipped over, which is criminal. So it's about time, and it feels like a really great time. It feels like every other week there's some sort of art week or festival or celebration of art and design and performance coming out of the region. So it's very exciting.
Anyone else have a question?
I'll give you a selection.
Thank you so much, both. I think you both touched on the fact that there's a degree of compromise when executing these curatorial projects in these institutions. So I'm curious to know a little bit more about how you specifically advocate for an artist's vision and maintain a sense of curatorial authenticity, also respecting that institutional framework.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of going back to that, the origin of the word curator is to care. That's where the Latin derives from. So it's really about working, the curator is in between the institution as an organisation and the artist as an individual. And so you've got your foot in kind of both places really to ensure that the individual that you're working with is nurtured and careful, and you're bringing out the best in their work, and you're also meeting the kind of institutional goals and ideals and behind. So often when I'm working on a project, I'm very careful to ensure that it's just me working directly with this person, but behind me there's like 50, almost 100 people that you need to consult, especially when you're creating new work. It's a whole operations team, which is, visitor experience, security, health and safety, conservation. There's certain materials that you can't use. But I'm really lucky to have amazing colleagues that are very keen to everyone wants to see things happen. We want to make work happen and work with artists. So it's kind of that balance between realism and practicality, but also not stifling creativity. And I guess that just comes with experience and time. Some things work, other things don't, but then you kind of adapt and change and experiment. But it's important to push the institution to do these things and try them, because it also sets a precedent. Once you've done something once, it then puts down a blueprint or a framework for how to do things differently in the future. And just because something's not been done before doesn't mean that it shouldn't be.
Yeah, I generally think it's very important to rely on emotional intellect, and I really think that being a curator requires a set of psychosomatic skills. You need to be in right places, in right mood, and you need to produce right effects in people's minds, including stakeholders in museums, but also really trusting an artist. And there's a very famous Russian curator, Viktor Mizyanov. He speaks of institutionalization of friendship, how you make friendships work towards shared goals. And I think when artists and an institution become friends, you achieve these goals very easily, and we just have to be there, just the conduit between these two worlds. Institutions are actually sometimes happy to change, and they are wary of themselves sometimes, and artists are the only way to actually make them change.
Thank you, and thank you for that question. Thank you so much to everyone for attending. Thank you to Iaroslav and Meneesha, and thank you to Kala, thank you to the Faisal and Shamana Foundation and Kisakoy for supporting this whole project, and we hope everyone has a wonderful day today. Thank you.